Welcome to our video series on the Canadian Census. You are watching Module 1, Introduction. In this module, you will learn about what type of data is collected for the Census of Population in Canada and how this data is collected. You will also learn to differentiate between census data products. The Census of Population is conducted by Statistics Canada. Statistics Canada is the major bureau within the Government of Canada that collects data about the population of Canada, but they also collect a lot of other data. For example, some other data that Statistics Canada collects that isn't part of the census is labor force data. That is how we knew about unemployment numbers that came up very quickly at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. That data is from the Labor Force Survey, which is another example of a dataset produced by Statistics Canada. The Census of Population is a statistical portrait of Canada and Canadians on one specific day taken every 5 years. The most recent happened in 2021, and the one before that in 2016. Each housing unit or their household is asked to fill out the census that collects various characteristics, such as demographic, social, and economic characteristics. This slide gives you an idea of the kind of questionnaire sets for the census. In May 2021, 100% of the households in Canada received the short form questionnaire. And what it asked for was your address, the date of birth of every individual living in the household, the gender or sex of every individual, the relationship to each member in the household, the knowledge of official languages, the language you speak at home, as well as other languages spoken regularly, and your mother tongue. The long-form census, however, goes to 25% of the population, or 1 in 4 households receives the long-form questionnaire. The long-form asks the same questions as the short-form, but it also asks more detailed questions about education, housing, immigration, income, labor, how you get to work, knowledge of different kinds of languages, mobility, and more. Once all of the data is compiled, it takes about a year for them to do all of the number crunching and to start delivering this information into different census data products. And this is the data that the government uses to make policy. It's what researchers in academia use to figure out patterns in the Canadian population for research purposes. And it's what students like you use to learn and prepare research for your assignments. The census data itself is private, so when you fill out that form and questionnaire, immediately that information becomes confidential. That is, your data is protected by 2 acts, the Privacy Act and the Statistics Act. This means that the information about you cannot be traced down to an individual level, and it will not be made available to the public. All of that detailed information about yourself and all those details about the individuals in your household are not released. Instead, Statistics Canada aggregates that information together into geographical units and distributes that back out to people for research purposes. This is to ensure that we still have access to the information that we need to do research or to make policy decisions, but it also conserves the privacy of the individuals. After the government takes the data and aggregates it together, they distribute out these aggregations as free resources to the public. This information is made available in a variety of formats, including data products like what we're going to interact with today, and reference materials that provide information to help you use the data set. And then there are also geographic information or data visualization tools. In addition, there is also a second level of more private resources that are made available to researchers. For example, if a researcher were to do an in-depth study, they could apply to Statistics Canada for more secure private data, and they may give it to the person if it meets their criteria. The data that this person might receive as a researcher will have all of the identifying information about the individuals stripped from it, but the researcher can actually access the raw numbers. So there are different checks and balances in place to make sure that the privacy of Canadians is kept, even if someone wants to gain access to data at the individual level. When you get data from Statistics Canada, it is divided up into different levels of geography. At the largest and perhaps most obvious level, we have the Canadian provinces and territories. But you can also get data at the regional municipality level, which in census language is called the census division. For example, a regional municipality of Peel or the Durham region is at the census division. The municipalities like Toronto, Mississauga, Markham, and Vaughan are at the census subdivision level. And if you combine all of those urban areas together, you get the census metropolitan areas, which are roughly equivalent to what we generally think of as metropolitan areas. For example, combining the city of Toronto with Peel and York gives us the census metropolitan area of Toronto. You can also get something called census tracts, and that's what we're going to be working with today. Census tracts are quite small, and they are relatively stable areas. They don't change much over time, and they usually have a population of less than 10,000 people. Census tracts are usually what you are looking for when someone says they are looking at census information at the neighborhood level. Even smaller than a census tract is something called the dissemination area. There are about 3 or 4 dissemination areas in a census tract. And then there's another level of geography, which is called the Federal Electoral District. It corresponds with the electoral district boundaries within federal elections. There are many other levels of geography as well, but today we are just focusing on the census geography. Looking at Statistics Canada's tables, we can see that there are many different tables that are available to you. We can see that there are general Census of Population data tables on the StatsCan website, and these are often very useful. While we're not going to be working with these tables today, because there is census profile data that is more structured and a bit easier to use, knowing that the data exists here may help you find data that is not in the census profile table, but may be here in the Census of Population data tables. Another resource you may find helpful is the Data and Statistics Research Guide, which you can find on York's library website under our research guides. You can use this guide for finding a variety of data, and we have a section on the census, which is a good place to start for understanding different census data products and for helping you find census data. And finally, we have the census profile tables, which is the data that we'll be working with today. What makes the census profile particularly useful is that it organizes the census data in a way that you can search. For example, you can look up a census tract number, and you can get a lot of the variables from the census. From here, after selecting a geographic area, you'll be able to see that the census includes many data variables about immigration, language, ethnicity, housing, employment, education, age, demographics of the population, and more. This data is what we'll be navigating today in our module. Next, we'll start on a step-by-step process to determine your census tract based on an intersection.